Hello, folks. Rob Barefoot here, and also here with Cody Pondsmith. We're both from Artusarian Games. If you're on this channel, you should already know that, I hope. And we're going to be here talking today about Shadowscar, Cody's new game that we got to announce at PAX Unplugged. Now, what we've done is we had a little bit of time over in our Discord, which if you want to join, links down below, easy to find. You can actually drop questions, and for this, we've gathered a few from the community, so we could give a little Q&A so you all know what to expect. Now, we're going to keep this brief. We're going to keep this casual. There's no reason to be completely caught up in tradition. You guys want to know what this is about, and that's why we're here. So, Cody, give them a quick little rundown of what Shadowscar is, and off the top of your head, just let it go. Let them know what they're in for.
So Shadowscar is a project I've been working on for probably like a decade or something now, probably two. Feels like it certainly. Um, it is a game of intrigue and espionage across a multiverse of worlds. Players play agents of this agency called the Shadowscar Agency, which is basically tasked with hunting down monsters and ghosts and other creatures from Japanese mythos that were accidentally seeded out into this multiverse of worlds called the Mosaic when a battle between two deities of the Japanese pantheon boiled over out of its home world into Katsukuni. So now you playing shinobi trained secret agents are going from dimension to dimension, experiencing a bunch of different worlds and hunting down a bunch of different unique and interesting monsters.
And so, with all that coming out, and thanks to Dicebreaker getting the news out there for us, which, by the way, hi Matt, how you doing? We right now are wanting to give people the chance to ask us. And starting off the top, this is actually the first one is from one of our admin on the Discord. This is actually from Njali. Now he straight up wants to know, what was your favorite thing to write in the setting?
My favorite thing to write in the setting for Shadowscar was probably actually writing the worlds. We're focusing, well, we have this big multiverse to play in. We're focusing on 4 dimensions to start with. And each one of them is kind of a take on Earth in a different sort of time period with a different alt history kind of bend. Our plan is to branch out as we go, but we wanted to start with this very sort of quality over quantity, focus on a few places to start with. And in putting together these worlds, I spent a lot of time kind of working out the alt history of a lot of them and working out specifically how they were going to be different from each other to try and make them as unique as possible. 2 of them, Steel Court and Fifth Street, which are respectively a steampunk world set in Europe in like the 1860s, roughly late 1860s, and Fifth Street being America right before the Great Depression in that tail end of the Roaring '20s. I actually started developing those worlds way back in high school when I was in a AP American History and AP European History course. So I would take notes on, in my AP Euro course, and then I would sit there and say, like, well, what would happen if, there was only one Napoleonic War? What would happen if the Industrial Revolution went 3 steps further and we got steampunk technology? So I probably, by far, the most fun was building those different worlds.
All right, this is from Flax Out. Word for word, and hopefully I pronounce one of these words in here right, because I'm totally going to butcher it. I'm good at that. Considering I read the ninja in the original post I saw, is there going to be a good amount of emphasis on the utilization of mundane items converted into tools? Or will it be more emphasis on things like ninjutsu in the style of Naruto or Nioh, where it's like a form of magic, but not 100%?
We focus in Shadowscar. I wanted to bring forward kind of a combination of the historical ninja and the mythical ninja. Those two, as anyone who studied Shinobi knows, those two are like wildly different things in a lot of ways. But what we do is we focus on effectively 3 aspects of your character. So one of those is techniques, and techniques are things that you can do that range from like special martial arts techniques that to special tools that you have access to and can create, and things like that, to effectively specific ways to interact with people, be able to better intimidate people, things like that. The second part of that is, of course, your Mikyo, which are your secret techniques. These are your magic. And this is a fairly contained grouping of spells, for lack of a better terminology, which you have access to at all times, and you can use to kind of build out your repertoire, with most of them being utility spells. The last section is tools. We have a big, big, big chapter of what we call the armory, which is weapons and outfits and armor and consumable tools and bombs and traps and things like that, that you can requisition from the agency, or you can have in your personal inventory to use. So in a way, following the way that traditional ninja actually work, we want to basically say, rather than sort of building a character with purely magic or purely tools, we want to basically allow you to build your character with a toolbox of techniques and Mikyo and physical tools that you can then deploy to solve whatever problem you happen to run into.
Okay, and that'll at least give them enough options to know if they want to keep it mundane, they can keep it mundane. If they want to go deeper into another one, they can. Now, this next one here is actually back on Worlds, and this one's going to be something that you and I talked about a little bit yesterday, just in a small manner. Was it yesterday or the day before? Today's Wednesday, isn't it? It'll be Monday. Monday. Okay. So this is from BM202. Are there limitations or guidelines when making a homebrew world in the Mosaic system? And does it have to be Japanese influence to fit the canon aesthetic?
So no. We go out of our way in core book and other products we'll be putting out to establish that the multiverse, the Mosaic, as we call it, is not one of those sort of like hundreds of transmutations of the same setting. Every single dimension in the Mosaic almost seems to have been custom made. So in that way, basically anything is possible in a very larger format. And actually, the goal is that this is very easy for people to homebrew their own content into it, or use third-party content for it. What I really want is I want people to be able to say, like, okay, we've been playing a lot in the established worlds. We did some missions into Katsukuni. We got to fly on a giant bird. We got to go to an underwater city of the gods. And then we did some games in Refuge, and we got to fly a spaceship in a space fight, and got to infiltrate a bio tower where they're engineering new plants. Now I really like this homebrew world that I've created, so I'm going to take you guys there. And due to the kind of nature of the Mosaic, any setting really is just about as canon effectively as any other, because it's very feasible that world could be out there somewhere in the Mosaic. And I really want to see, I'm excited actually to see how people add to that concept, and like what weird worlds they bring in, even out to like, if somebody says like, I really like Shadowscar, but I also really love RuneQuest. So, I want to have my players, infiltrating the world of RuneQuest tomorrow. And, I'm down for that. I love that. That's a great idea to me.
I'm actually hoping to see it that way too, because the fun of it is I hope people catch on that these are not the only places you can go. Like, it, by design, it's made that they can hop around where they want to, even in their normal new places. I'd be interested to see if they try to take themselves back to old stories they may even played in older games. So I'm curious to see if that happens too. From here, I want to at least go into the next question. As for what we just said, you guys will never know about it. Sorry, too bad. This one here is Blake Chandler, and they want to know a big question here, because this is one of the more fun things I see discussed, especially through our playtests. What can we expect from the system's combat?
Okay, so I took a bit of a weird angle on combat in Shadowscar. I tend to think of Shadowscar as less of a combat game and more of a puzzle game. And I took heavy inspiration from Tenchu Wrath of Heaven and Tenchu Z in kind of building the combat of the setting, in that the goal is that whenever you play a game, whenever you kind of depart on a mission, you are kind of placed in an environment with a lot of interesting things and then given a goal. So, say for instance that you are placed in, the castle of a local daimyo, and your goal is to, steal blackmail material or something so that you can, keep this noble from rebelling against the Empire of Nihon, for instance. There could be guards all over this castle, and there probably will be, but you are not required to fight them even at all. And if you do, there's a good chance that you'll get spotted or something, like they'll raise the alarm or something like that and put you in massive jeopardy. So we actually focus on this sort of like puzzle game, like, how am I going to get in? There's a guard at that door. I need to take out that guard as quietly as possible. Then I need to like hide the body and slip through the area. And I know that, there's somebody in the personal study of this local daimyo, and I'm going to need to find some way to get them out of there and or take them out, and then get back out again. So our primary focus is on basically giving you the opportunity to kind of plan your route out. And one of the things we do is the assassinate action, which is an action you can take when you're undetected by an opponent to basically make one or two rolls, depending on their sort of rank, their threat rating, and take them out silently, much like you'd see as a cutscene kill or a takedown in a video game. When you do this, you take them out, reduce them to 0 hit points, nobody in the area notices, and you have that sort of now I've got to hide the body moment. If you fail that, you fail to do any damage, they are alerted to you, and everybody in the environment is also alerted to you. So there's a bit of a push and pull of, having to really plan out your route to make sure that you, even if you fail that assassination, perhaps you're in a quiet enough space that that's not going to absolutely blow your cover. But of course, this being a very anime game, we've also put a lot of thought into combat so that, you have that option to go into combat. We want to have, the classic anime face downs where, it's you and your group fighting a Nue or, perhaps an Oni with a giant flaming kanabo or something like that. But we've kind of done it in such a way that the intention is for combat to flow fast, to be fairly deadly, but to give you a lot of options. We have a fair amount of options as far as like using the environment around you to hinder or damage your opponents. We give you options, obviously, ones like disarming and grappling, choking people, shoving them off of buildings, things like that, to kind of, once again, almost bring that puzzle element into the combat of like, it's not me running in and making a bunch of attack checks until they fall down. I have options in how I go about this, and my techniques and my tools and my Mikyo also come in to expand the options that I have in that combat to have those really flashy sort of cinematic anime fight scenes.
And that's the one thing I do admire about it. As was mentioned in the Dicebreaker interview, one of your inspirations, of course, we brought up Tenchu Stealth Assassins, which I wore the game out much more than I should as a kid. And so seeing that vibe in, but also having the straight up anime style of fighting too, it's definitely going to be able to appeal to multiple groups who have different styles of play. And that's always a plus.
In one of my earlier play tests with my home group, we had an amazing moment where they were infiltrating a steam train in Steel Court, and they were trying to take down a smuggler who had been hired by the yokai to smuggle a spirit lantern with the soul of one of the fallen shadowscar agents to the enemy in a different country. So we had a scene where they were it wound up with one of them on the roof of a speeding steam train traveling through the Alps at night, having a knife fight with this smuggler on top of the train. And it was it was fantastic. That was an amazing scene.
I can hear the background music, just picturing that. Nothing but moonlight and screaming. That's awesome. So, this one I think is biased. This is a very biased question here. So,
Okay.
you'll see what I mean by the time I get done with the name of the question. So, Kajika, the Ninetales Kitsune, asks, will there be Kitsune as a playable race? I wonder why they're wanting to know that.
I wonder too. So no. Unfortunately, I have to break their heart. The setting that Shadowscar takes place in is one where all of the yokai that we traditionally know have been effectively mind controlled by Yomi, by the afterlife, and by Izanami, the queen of the dead of the current time period. So they are very solidly against humanity, though they are not as much as they were in an earlier time period. They have retained some of their sapience. They have gotten some of their personality back, and they are capable of like forming their own thoughts, which they weren't previously capable of doing under the mind control of Izanami. But they're still very much enemies, and they're still very much tied to the larger enemy faction. That being said, once you buy this game, it's yours, and I'm not going to break down your door no matter what you do, except death threats, and or domestic terrorism, I guess. So we have stats for Kitsune in core book, and I'm sure that it would be very easy to third party those or homebrew those into a playable character, though they are, of course, very powerful, because Kitsune are very powerful yokai. That also being said, while we don't really talk about it in core book, we have plans to talk about it later. In Shadowscar, we expand on the concept of the Hanyo, the half yokai, which are children who are born from one human parent and one yokai parent. And we have intentions down the road to actually make rules for people to play Hanyo, though at the current time period, playing a Hanyo is much like, playing a tiefling in D&D is theoretically supposed to be. You are pretty much of your own sound mind and body, but people are still going to not necessarily trust you because, half of your lineage is monsters that have been trying to destroy humanity for 100 years.
You just opened a can of worms for me, I think. I think I'm going to have to answer a lot of questions on that one when people see this. This next question, though, this is a toughie. This is, I'm going to let you have all the fun with this one, because Slade has given us a fun one. Yeah, here we go. Slade935, very active in the Discord. He wants to know, since this world from the start is highly encouraging homebrew worlds, etc., will you be outsourcing to third parties for supplements or coming up with your own OGL concept? Exactly. I was like, oh no.
So I can only speak to this as myself. We here at Telstorian haven't really dipped our toes too far into an OGL concept, and we don't tend to work with third-party creators a whole lot, mostly just because we're a very small company and we tend to create stuff at a lower sort of threshold. That being said, I personally have a lot of interest in that. Like I said previously when we were talking about dimensions, I want to support third party because I really want people to be able to kind of flesh out the multiverse with their own ideas. Because, as I said, the Mosaic is vast and there are many, many worlds in it. And, who am I to say that your homebrew world is not part of the Mosaic? So while I cannot say anything official, and my business manager will kill me if I do, I am very interested in putting together some form of OGL-esque sort of situation, such that we would be able to have people doing, third-party content. And I would definitely be interested in working with other creators to build content for Shadowscar, because I want to see how other people build on the Shadowscar concept in a lot of places.
I think we'll just see how it all winds up in the end. That was a tough question.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
TLDR, I would love to, but if I say anything, my business manager will kill me.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way we can leave it. So we'll move immediately over into the next one. Slade, I'll get you back for that later. This is just from James. Not our James. Not our James.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is from James, and they want to know, what's the player character customization look like? Are there fantasy races? What's the variety of classes?
So character creation is built on kind of 5 big points. So in building your character, you start out with your homeland. Your homeland is like your race equivalent. Basically, it establishes what world your character originally came from. So at the moment, it is the 4 that we've established: Nikatsukuni, Fifth Street, Steel Court, and Refuge. And this gives you access to one homeland ability that you can choose between a few of them. You will then go on and roll a life path for your character. We have a somewhat shortened version of life path that we run for Shadowscar that allows you to make a bunch of rolls to determine your character's history and like what their family was like, who they were influenced by as a child, all of that sort of stuff, which is mostly aesthetic design, but it's neat. It helps build interesting characters. You then build stats and skills, which are condensed to a tri-stat system with a pretty substantially smaller number of skills than most of our other games. And then quirks, because I am personally a massive fan of add-disadd systems. You can pick 2 disadvantages in return for 2 advantages. And these are things like missing limbs and bad tempers and things like that. And then you were able to buy stuff like, being a contortionist or being wealthy, many of the concepts that you expect from an add-disadd system, which allows you to kind of build out more of what the character is like at sort of a baseline level. Then the final sort of customization point before you get to buying your personal inventory, which is all the gear you have access to, is your Shinobi clan. There are 6 Shinobi clans, and you pick one of them. Once you have picked that, you do not move from it. While multi-classing is not technically something you can't do in the setting, in world, all of the things you are learning are, ancient secrets that have been held by these Shinobi clans for centuries. Which means that while you could arguably learn Mikyo from another clan if you know somebody from that clan, both of you run the risk of being summarily executed if anybody ever finds out that you shared the secrets of your clan.
Well, that took a dark turn.
Yes. Well, you know what? We take our ninjutsu seriously here. So your clan provides you with a group of techniques, which, as I said previously, are the sort of non-magical abilities that you gain from your training, and Mikyo, which are the magical abilities that you gain. And then as you go, you rank up through the different ranks of the agency, starting at Genin, which is the basic foot soldiers, moving up to Chunin, which is more sort of, captains, up into Jonin, which is the highest rank you can attain. Before you get into the you're taken out of the field and you're no longer doing stuff in the field all the time. And as you hit those plateaus for different ranks, you gain access to more techniques and more Mikyo from your clan.
All right.
I am a sucker for abilities and leveling up that makes you feel like you're gaining something more than just like adding a +1 to a stat. So there's a lot of abilities and techniques and things like that to really customize out your character.
I'm a big fan of the disadd system too. When it comes to being able to actually have flaws that will, push up into something good, that gives so much more character, for lack of a term, more character to the character. It gives them much more foundation. Plus, you can always have just these interesting little quirks that, even though you may view as a disadvantage, can end up helping you out in the end in some crazy ways. All right, so this one, this is from Meanswell. Now, their question is...
I hope they mean well.
I'm hoping so too as we go into this. Do you see this system as leaning into multiversal storyline campaigns, or being a system that can support a campaign of any genre?
So obviously the system was kind of designed for the world. So it does lend itself well to multi-dimensional campaigns, but it can play in a lot of genres because the system is fairly light. I know that if I'm understanding the question correctly, we have an entire variant state of play designed for that. So while we have the more dimension hopping state of standard Shadowscar play, we have something that we refer to as Vanguard teams. And a Vanguard team is more like a Kingsman or a James Bond or something like that, where you are all characters drawn from the same world. You live in that world full time. You have a secret hideout that might be in like the basement of an arcade or the back room of a tailor shop or something like that, which is your secret hideout. And your job is to deal with yokai and threats to your homeworld specifically, instead of kind of doing the like traveling between dimensions. And when you do that, there's a lot of options for alternate gameplay, because this adds in things like, I want to play a horror game. Okay, well, we're in one setting and we can really flesh out the feeling of that setting, so we can kind of turn that knob towards horror, with the yokai being a very like invasive demonic force that's like manipulating and corrupting people in your world. Maybe they're corrupting people that you know and care about. You can play it, as I have many times in the past, as a lot more of a almost like a sitcom situation, because Vanguard teams have to deal with the fact that they don't leave their home dimension, which means for like 4 months out of the year, you have to tell your family like, hey, I'm going to work. And then you just like, I've had situations where you have more of the classic, almost like superhero-esque, you're in the middle of a mission and like your family calls and you have to figure out how to explain what you're doing, you know? So it plays to both fairly well, though it was, intended more for the sort of multidimensional setting. The actual system effect of the settings is fairly light, so it can be played as sort of a single setting, in a different genre pretty easily.
This one is from Zalrock Chaos. I like the name. This is going to be another one about character creation. What will the statistic/skill maximum be like? And like Witcher/Red, or a different number entirely?
So when you start out, the maximum is 3 for both. So we, I love dice as much as the next gamer, but there comes a time when you have too many. So the majority of people are rolling between 1 and 6 dice, and then once you get to sort of that higher level of gameplay, you start unlocking superhuman capabilities. And superhuman capabilities mean that you can take your statistic to 4 or 5. 5 is like the absolute highest that your statistics will ever go to, and your skills will only ever go to 3. So at the most, if you count in bonus dice, you're going to be rolling like 10 dice. But in most circumstances, you're going to be rolling in that like 3 to 5 dice territory.
So that's the one thing about it. Most folks are, what I expect, they're expecting something like Interlock, but they have to catch on that this is something entirely new. Now, this next one, this is going back to more theme in the end. This is from Cotolio. Hopefully I said your name right, mate. Being multiversal, what are the varieties in the ninja-like characters? Could we see a sci-fi ninja player character partnering with, say, one that looks closer to traditional ninjas? Or like one of the mentioned vigilantes in one of your guys' pictures that you showed as a tease. I'm assuming they mean 5th Street when we had vigilantes on the roof. And they do say they were very excited for the game. But yeah, when it comes to variety like that, what are we hitting them with?
So the variety comes, it's interesting because as far as player characters, there's a lot of different types of characters you can wind up with your homeland. For instance, in the we've made some pre-generated characters, obviously, for future content. And among those pre-generated characters, we have one character, Hugo, who is a ex-soldier from Fifth Street who fought in World War One, fighting for the Prussians. And he is this like grizzled, very almost sort of like pulp noir guy who had one of his arms blown off by cannon fire in the Great War, and he now has this like weird science mechanical arm. But at the same time, we have Atsuko Nishijima, who is native to Nakatsukuni, who grew up in the red light district of a major city to kind of a poor family, and wound up throwing in with a criminal syndicate similar to the Yakuza, and then joined the agency because her brother, who had joined previously, died, and like named her their successor. And at the same time, we have Carmen, who is from Refuge, our sort of far future setting, who is a rich spaceship pilot. She literally spent the majority of her early life as a racer on the spaceship racing circuit, and made like millions of dollars racing in spaceship races, and then decided to join the agency to try to make a difference in the world and save her dimension from being destroyed. So there are a lot of different characters with a lot of different backgrounds, and then in your actual, like, in the system of your character, those different schools that I mentioned all have different aesthetics. Like the Wanami, for instance, are like monster hunters in much more like almost like a traditional, like a Witcher-esque sense, to pull from another product we work on, where you have like enhanced senses to track down your prey, and you might have an animal companion who hunts with you and stuff like that. Where the Arashi, for instance, are this group of like rebels and bandits and brigands who control the storm. So their spells are all focused around like lightning and wind, and they have all of these like underhanded tactics that they can use to sabotage their opponents and things like that. So the breadth of types of characters is very wide.
The moment you said Hugo, and I'll at least say this, Hugo's been a favorite in playtesting. The moment you said him, I couldn't help but smile. He's got nothing but fans. I can't wait for people to get their hands on them. So this one is a bit of a long one, but it's actually a good question here. Now, this is also having to do with the worlds, the Mosaic. Cannibal Hachi, they want to know, how do the inhabitants of the different worlds of the Mosaic perceive each other, and does that apply to the yokai as well? And to give an example, is there some kind of weirdness sensor that glosses over the different dress or technology of each world to be what it is for normal in that world? Or do they stick out like sore thumbs and need to camouflage themselves?
So we did not go the easy route in this one. There is one piece of magical technology that helps you as an agent fit in, which is every agent has 3 tattoos, one of which allows your handler, the person who's giving you your missions, to watch through your eyes. One of them is effectively there to translate anything you say or write, and one of them is there to translate anything you hear or read. But beyond that, every Shadowscar agent, when they go on a mission, is given clothing appropriate for that dimension. You swap out any weapons you have with, visually, aesthetically similar to the dimension you're going to. And you do actually have to disguise yourself rather than there being some form of like illusion magic or something like that. On the yokai side, this is done in a little bit more of a complicated way, which is that because most or many of the yokai are big monstrous creatures, they have what are called kamen. And kamen masks are these magically created porcelain masks that, when they put them on, will transform their bodies into a sort of equivalent looking human form. This reduces their power, but it allows them to hide in plain sight. So you might have, for instance, an Ushioni, which is naturally this big, like, tentacled monster with an ox head and big horns and all this, but they have this mask which allows them to put it on and transform into, a big burly dude who might have slightly, almost like kind of bovine features, maybe like big flat nose, broad forehead, something like that, but looks human. So there is this kind of game in many respects as the Shadowscar agents are disguising themselves and then having to pick out the yokai who have disguised themselves via these magical masks.
I see. The moment you started saying Ushioni, I was like, I'm thinking of one individual exactly straight from Naruto that immediately made me think of like how it's little subtleties that make him look like what was in him. I'm going to say Killer Bee because it's one of the best characters in the show. And just like hearing that has so much sneaky fun with it too. But being able to have the... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say one of my favorite aspects is that one of those Shinobi clans, the Tante, are actually able to take the kamen from a yokai and use it themselves. So if they kill a yokai, they can take that yokai's kamen and use it to disguise themselves as the human disguise of that yokai to then reverse infiltrate the yokai that yokai was working with.
That's cool. That's cool. All right, I won't start going into it. This is your Q&A, not mine. And this next question is a quick one and an easy one. Sailor Leia wants to know where will we be able to purchase or pre-order this item?
So we don't do pre-orders generally, but when everything is said and done, it will be purchasable at probably most game stores and hobby stores. Artel Saurian is carried by pretty much all of the major distributors. So if you can't find it in your local hobby store, just talk to them about it. They should be able to find Shadowscar and any of the products we put out through, pretty much any distributor. But you can also buy it on our website, and it will be available in PDF at DriveThruRPG. So we try to make it as available as possible.
Mm-hmm. Just no pre-orders from us. We typically just don't do that. Now, This next question kind of goes back to what we were just discussing from Cannibal Hachi's question. Grand Soulstone has this one. For the force of demons throughout the realms, what do they look like or appear as? Are they more typical demons or are they unique? Do they have different appearances throughout the realms?
So in most circumstances, the yokai look as they did back in Nikatsukuni. Not enough time has really passed for them to evolve in any really substantial way. So it's not like you would see an Oni evolving to look differently because it's in refuge. But there is one interesting aspect, which is that a lot of yokai are born from objects or people. And actually, one of the major goals of the yokai is to use rituals and influence to turn people and objects in those multiple dimensions into more yokai. So, for instance, one of the things we want to touch on is the concept of Tsukumogami, which are yokai that are born from objects. So, while you might see a Karakasa, for instance, which is the living umbrella with the single eye and the 1 foot, while that might look like a parasol from Edo era Japan, it might be that the yokai were able to create a Karakasa in refuge, for instance, and it looks like a very sleek modern umbrella with maybe clear plastic sheeting and that sort of thing. Or you might have, for instance, there are, though I forget their name at the moment, there are Tsukumogami that are born from wagons, that are living free roaming wagons, and you might see Tsukumogami in that vein that are born from cars instead. So you might have a Christine kind of situation with a car in 5th Street that has been turned into a yokai.
Was where my mind immediately went, oh crap, Christine. Like it hit and then you said it.
Exactly. Down the road, probably in dedicated adventure content, I want to toy with yokai that have kind of really gotten used to the dimension they're in now. So maybe they have taken on more aspects of that dimension as they have gotten used to living there. But that's always kind of on a case-by-case basis.
So we're going back now to the armory itself. Now this is from Mr. Amov. Amov. Sorry if I mispronounced that, bud. What sort of weapons are expected? Is it melee/archaic weapons only, or does it vary in Mosaic? Also, is there weapon restrictions based on realm?
So the weapons in core book, weapons are generally, we do very similar to what we do in Cyberpunk Red. We have categories of weapons. So, you would requisition a sword. And that sword could look like a Chinese jian, or that sword could look like a Japanese katana, or it could look like a claymore. Well, it wouldn't look like a claymore. It would look like a German longsword. But they are all the same sort of category. And then on top of that, we have unique items or dimensional items. Like, for instance, in Steel Court, at one point in one of the adventures we're currently writing, we reference electro gauntlets, which are gauntlets, but they're the big, like, fully metal goes over the arm down to the elbow, and it's got like a big, Tesla coil looking thing on it, and it discharges electricity when you punch people. So we're going to be like adding in dimension specific items as we go that are much akin to like the exotic weapons of Cyberpunk, where they are a variant of the standard weapon that has been made special in some way by either the creator or the dimension it comes from. But in that vein, Shadowscar has one overarching rule that everyone has to follow, which is if at first you don't succeed, leave no witnesses. The agency doesn't really care if you use non-dimension specific technology in another dimension, but you have to not get caught. So if you want to bring a Tommy gun into Nakatsukuni, you can. You just have to make sure that nobody sees you doing it, that nobody witnesses it, that nobody can track it down, that nobody can realize that you used, effectively cross-dimensional contraband in their world.
Getting Men in Black vibes with that part. That's awesome. Okay. Now this one is from Lord Jesus Crust, long member of the community here. And they actually have a really cool question for you. Due to the setting being steeped in Japanese mythology, they wanted to know, did you learn to speak or read any Japanese to assist in research for the setting?
So I took 3 years of Japanese in high school. In just the peak of my interest in anime and Japanese culture. Unfortunately, I did not really have anyone else who spoke Japanese around me, so I actually lost a lot of that knowledge, unfortunately. But I have been actively brushing up on my Japanese as I've been working on Shadowscar, trying to get back to a level where I can use some of those Japanese sources without having to rely on translations that might not be completely accurate. It's a process, but yes, I am actively kind of brushing up on the 3 years I had in high school and expanding out from there.
Now, here's something I actually am curious about too. This is from someone called 15. Will there be epic battles against Kami or some big bad evil guy being Kami?
So we tend not to do big bad battles as much because your focus is on stealth, and theoretically, if you're having a battle that like knocks down city blocks, you have kind of failed the secondary goal of the mission, which was to not be noticed. But that being said, we have the core of Shadowscar focuses around this core concept of, while you are keeping order in the multiverse and trying to hunt down these yokai, higher ranking agents are searching the Mosaic for Izanami, the goddess of death, because she is somewhere out there regaining her strength. So down the road, there may be a capability for you to take part in a battle against Izanami, but that would almost be more like a raid boss than like a one-on-one fight. Because of course you would be fighting something with godlike power. The other aspect that I've wanted to work with that I have not yet, but somewhere down the road in supplements I'm really excited about is Kyojin yokai. So there are a lot of yokai out there that are like Kappa and Namahage and Oni that are closer to human scale. But there are also yokai like Isonade, which are the giant barbed fish, and Omukade, which are the giant fire-breathing centipedes, and Gasha Dokuro, which are spirits of fallen warriors and plague and famine that were classified as Kyojin level threats. So they were these giant monster yokai effectively. And the majority of those were killed during the last battles of the 100 Years of Sorrow, which is the war that came before all of this. But not all of them are accounted for. So somewhere down the road, I would love to do a whole scenario where it's just like there's a giant fire-breathing centipede loose in New York, and all concept of stealth has been thrown out the window. We need to contain this as quickly as possible so that we can start, hunting down as many witnesses we can to try to erase memories and put in some form of cover story. But for the time being, we need you and this other group of agents to take out this giant fire-breathing centipede.
We're coming down to the last few here, actually. This is going to be, after this one, we're in the final 3. This is from Mass Dark. And they ask, having played Rifts and Torg, one issue always seemed to be balance. How do you intend to balance the Mosaic's character classes when magic can exist with technology and some denizens may even have superhero-like abilities?
So the balancing on that is done largely through a combination of two things. First being that the homeland you come from gives you one ability. It does not really factor in for a lot of your character because you are kind of considered to be, an everyday person in that setting, or you were at one time. So we're not going to have a situation like Witcher, for instance, where one person is playing a character from this dimension and thus they have like 7 special abilities. And if we do that down the road with new dimensions, the focus would be on trying to balance those out and give them abilities and negatives to match out that are appropriate, so that you would be a bit more of a glass cannon if you are very powerful. But a lot of the balance comes from the fact that these dimensions are all at the same tier. So, Refuge has the highest technology of any of these dimensions because, it's spacefaring and, they've got spaceships and high-tech technology and things like that. But all of that can be relatively equaled by the magic in Nakatsukuni. And then at the same time, the steam technology in Steel Court works way better than it should, such to the point where it is effectively equivalent to that super tech in Refuge. And then in Fifth Street, while the technology is all fairly mundane, it benefits from that narrative boost that makes it bigger than it normally would be. So they all kind of are at the same tier, despite being from very different tech levels and things like that.
All right, so this final question going into the last 3. This is from 2Minty4Mitty. Now, they just want to know, what was the biggest inspiration for the setting?
So this one is actually pretty hard because I've been working on this game forever. I've been working on it for something like 18 years in some capacity or another. So, I mean, the largest inspirations have gone through, obviously, its first largest inspiration was Naruto. There was an era when this was pretty much a Naruto role-playing game. And then, it was heavily inspired by things like Samurai Champloo and other anime that I watched when I was growing up, like Soul Eater. a lot of the inspiration has often come from anime that I was watching at that time period when I was writing it. It has been inspired by a lot of the new stuff. A lot of the new sort of design of Shadowscar was inspired by stuff like Rainbow Six Siege, for instance, which I got big into for a while. That sort of like, secret agency, special forces sort of aesthetic that kind of went into Shadowscar. But I would say that in a weird sort of way, the major inspiration has kind of always been the anime that I was currently watching at that time. So that has been Naruto, that's been Samurai Champloo, that has been Soul Eater, that has been Demon Slayer, that has been just a tremendous number of different animes over like the last 18 years. I'm currently watching Jujutsu Kaisen and taking inspiration from that now too. So
here we go. This is going to be another big one. Duba, how has the setting evolved since you first conceived it?
First, I want to just preface by saying, please don't judge me. And I was very young. Shadowscar has gone through like 15 revs in the process of building it. When it started out, it was me and my friend being 11 and being massive Naruto fans, and it was basically a Naruto role-playing game with the numbers filed off. It slowly became its own thing over the years until it eventually took a weird turn when I was like in my early teens, and there was an entire era in which it was like a very anime, like ninja high school type game, where you were going to like an almost My Hero Academia style like ninja academy. It went through, and for a lot of these early periods, it was not even a multi-dimensional setting. It was just purely, what would become Nakatsukuni as this sort of traditional Japanese setting. It actually became a multi-dimensional setting, like, I want to say 10 years ago or so, when I started adding in other concepts just as other worlds that I would run in my home games of this game. And those were originally, Refuge and Steel Court and Nakatsukuni and Fifth Street that kind of evolved over time into kind of what they are now, just kind of over this long period of me running them and adding in little things here and there and, changing aspects for games that I was running and things like that. So it has it's interesting because, not to get too I don't know, philosophical or whatever, but the fact that I started working on this game when I was 11 and working on a game from like pre-teens into adulthood, the game has changed so tremendously over those years. It is quite literally grown up with me.
This last one is from somebody you know well, someone I know well
boy.
too. We're going to bookend it with one last administrator question, and it's from Slovak.
All right.
Our boy Slovak. Thank you again at PAX, by the way. You saved my tail. What sorts of gameplay and stories are you hoping people come up with using this system and setting?
So, I want to tell interesting, like, thriller intrigue stories the most. I've always found that Shadowscar works really well if you kind of run it as like a spy film. So you've got, tales of double agents and, deep cover infiltration and, finding out that your partner that you've been working with for years, turns their back on the agency and goes rogue and you have to hunt them down. But also a lot of the sort of, like hidden world, like Warehouse 13, Men in Black, other settings like that where you're in that, like, we have to deal with the mundanes and keep them from discovering the truth. And maybe at some point in the game, you meet an NPC who isn't part of the agency and they turn out to be a really cool NPC. So you're like, well, we want to adopt that NPC and bring them into the agency so that then down the line they can be doing secret missions with us and stuff after they've joined the agency and whatnot. So it's really, I think of it really heavily as like a spy game or like a thriller film.
I have gotten so many different vibes and feels about when it comes to what to expect with this. Like, I am biased. I have a favorite world. I have a playstyle I enjoy, but I already know it may not be everyone else's. And knowing it just has so many ways you can do it, know where the intent is going to be, I'm looking forward to it myself, just to get my hands on it. Now, that brings us to the end of all the questions, at least the ones that we selected, at least from the pool. So, before we wrap this up, Cody, is there anything else you want to throw their way? Any bones or teases? Anything like that before we wrap this up?
I mean, I could talk about this forever, but I think I should probably stop here because I realized that over the course of these questions, I think I have probably talked about like 7 or 8 things that we hadn't actually announced yet.
I was sitting here like, oh boy. When people get a hold of this Q&A, I think they're going to be very, very interested. We're going to see here. And yeah,
I hope to see a lot of discussion about it.
I hope so too. And of course, for any discussion, guys, swing on over to our Discord. I have the link down below. I have the link down in the doobly-doo. And if you all want to just come say hi, we're in there too. It's your direct link to us at any time. But other than that, you can find us on all social medias. You can find out more information on our website. You can reach out to me if you need anything media. And, you want to sit down with Cody and talk about this more, ask. We'll do our best. But yeah, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up here. Anything you want to say, Cody?
Nothing other than stay safe, stay healthy, everybody.